People think money can buy miracles. But what happens when a billionaire's daughter is born without a voice, and no fortune, no doctor, no prayer can change it? Behind iron gates and marble halls, silence grew like a second shadow. Then, one dawn, a garbage man humming a lullaby her mother once sang shattered the stillness. A wordless exchange of foil cranes, drawings, and courage became the one thing her father's empire could not control. Until the storm came, and with it, the impossible. People say money buys miracles. They say it as if bills can kneel, as if cards can bend like prayer, as if a private jet can punch a hole in the sky and a miracle will drop through. They have not been in the room where a tiny girl opens her mouth and nothing comes out. They haven't watched the parade of specialists and saints trail through a home, the scent of eucalyptus and disinfectant clinging to the air like stubborn ghosts. They haven't felt the ache of a silence that grows and grows until it is big enough to live inside. They say money buys miracles because money buys almost everything else, and it's too frightening to imagine there are things it cannot touch. I was born to a man who believes every problem is a contract with a missing signature. Victor Salcedo was the first person people saw when they looked at our house. An empire sharpened into a jawline, a suit that fit like it was ironed onto the spine. Our family name was on buildings and scholarships and hospitals. It was also on gossip blogs and glossy magazines. If you don't recognize the name, imagine a skyline at sunset. Imagine one of those silhouettes belongs to a man who has acquired the right to pretend the sun is a recurring meeting he alone invites to rise every morning. That man is my father. He loves me like a storm loves a shoreline, fierce and impatient, chewing at every edge. He has always thought of my quiet like a wall he could charge until it crumbles. I've never spoken, not to him, not to anyone, since birth. The months rolled up their sleeves and turned into years, and still I never felt a word lift from me and sail into another person's waiting ear. My mouth is a house where the windows never open. Doctors took photographs of my brain with light and magnets and murmured phrases that fit like two large coats. Congenital this, selective that, psychogenic, developmental, spectrum, the kind of words that excuse themselves for their vagueness by sounding intelligent. My father listened and nodded and wrote checks. Mothers like to braid hope into hair and tuck it behind ears. My mother braided lullabies into night until her voice threaded through my dreams, gentle, honey-warm, a hum like a porch light. But I never answered her, not with a single syllable. Then she left before I learned how to misplace the ache. A fever gathered her like the city gathers trash at dawn, swift, unseen by most, and devastating for those who watch it happen. My mother's name was Luna. She smelled like lemon peel and expensive tea, and she laughed as if she had invented the sound. She would hold me and hum, a tune that felt like rocking in a hammock between two friendly trees, Sa Ugoy Nung Duyan, her little anthem. When she died, the house swelled with flowers and shrunk with grief. The petals browned. The visitors wore black and then wore the rest of their lives. The house continued. My father built and bought and negotiated. He switched to decaf, slept in 3-hour increments, and added the word inevitability to his favorite sentences. He kept a double photo frame on his desk, with my mother on the left and me on the right. The glass gathered fingerprints from all the times he reached out and forgot he could not touch memory. Our home has gates that remember stories. Tall, iron, a curl of vines set in steel. They sigh every morning when the bins are rolled out. Our street is the kind that collects early sunlight like a blessing. Before the city shakes itself awake, the trucks come. They come with their diesel breath and their unforgiving schedules, and a team of men who lift the leavings of other lives without looking away. They are the only people who visit without pretending they are visiting, a kind of honesty I learned to admire. It is at the gates that I first saw him. He stepped down from the back of a green truck like he was stepping off a small stage, not a platform with rust freckles. He had a face like patience. His uniform wanted to be clean the way a poem wants to be finished. He stretched his shoulders and hummed a tune that was either something I recognized or something I had been waiting to recognize. I could hear it through the window if I kept it open a crack. He was the garbage man assigned to our street, Mateo Cruz. There is a version of this story where this detail invites pity, where the word garbage sticks to him like a label slapped on his forehead. That is not this story. If you have watched a man lift the world from a curb before anyone is awake enough to be grateful, you know garbage is only a job title. It is also sometimes a disguise a storyteller must endure until the story is ready to reveal the truth. He was strong in the way bridges are strong, not because they never take on weight, but because they were designed to. His hands caught the metal handles of our bins, and he tilted them with a carefulness that startled me. It was respect for the trash, for the object that held the trash, respect for a thing nobody respects. I pressed my palm to the glass as if I could feel the seam of his attention through it. The first time we made eye contact, I felt something tilt inside me, like a picture frame that finally found a nail. He lifted his face, glance sliding up toward the window I always haunted, and he saw me the way you see a bird that has mistaken a room for a sky and can't find the open door. He didn't wave. He didn't point. He simply nodded a slow acknowledgement. I nodded back before I could stop myself. When he moved again, the song he was humming swelled. I felt old paper fold itself inside my chest. Sa ugoy nang duyan. My mother's lullaby wrapped in a man's voice in a dawn that smelled like wet leaves and diesel. I watched him the next morning and the morning after. He always hummed while he worked. Sometimes he sang a line under his breath, as if daring the air to harmonize. Other mornings he whistled, a melody smooth enough to roll down the driveway, curl around my ankles, and follow me through the halls. I learned his rhythm, the way he wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist after every fourth bin, the way he checked the straps on the truck twice before climbing back on. He laughed with his teammates, not loudly or with a kind of claim, but like he was giving back a thought and making it softer in the returning. I measured the distance between the window and the gate, a calculus that had nothing to do with meters and everything to do with the elastic of bravery. I never stepped outside. The women who taught me to name colors in my head also taught me to hold my tongue. Occupational therapists, speech therapists, psychologists with eyes like small lakes. I collected them like my father collected awards. I grew, and my silence grew with me, until it was a dress that fit no matter how my body changed. The city outside learned my patterns without knowing my name, the car with tinted windows that slid through the security gates, the driver who spoke for me when necessary, the teachers who emailed my father in carefully curated paragraphs in which the word progress made an appearance like a guest star. People thought I was cold. You would think that if you were a person who believed words are the only way to show heat. But my life was fierce with temperature. I felt it in music. I felt it in the way that humming came closer every morning, and in the way the sun ran its fingers through the crown of acacia trees by our fence. I started leaving something at the end of the driveway. At first it was a flower I stole from the garden. Then it was a note made of paper with lines on it. Not words, drawings. A bird, because I always felt like one trapped. A lemon, because that was my mother. A small boat, because my father loved the ocean like a business partner. I drew with meticulous care, then walked to the gate at 4:45 in the morning, the hour when the horizon is a rumor. I left the drawing by the post and walked quickly back into the house, my pulse clicking like a metronome, and stood at the window as if it would lend me its patience. When the truck came, the men jumped down from the back, and Mateo went to our bins first. He saw the drawing immediately. He bent, picked it up, and unfolded it with the kind of slowness usually reserved for old maps. The corner of his mouth lifted. He looked up, straight up, exactly where he knew I would be, and he nodded again. Then he tucked the drawing into his front pocket like a promise. The next morning, a gift was waiting where I had left mine, a small crane folded from candy wrapper foil. The wings glittered in the very beginnings of daylight. I picked it up with both hands, as if it could be frightened away. He had folded it well, edges crisp despite the fragile material. I held it to my ear the way a child holds a seashell, and I swear I could hear something oceanic. I placed it on my desk next to a framed photo of my mother and my father's signature engraved in bronze on a paperweight he liked to give guests. I drew again that night, a moon this time, and left it at the gate. The foil cranes multiplied over the next week, a flock of quiet exchange. Our silent friendship became a daily ritual. He never tried to speak to me through the gate. He never called out. He understood that my silence was not an absence to be filled, but a room I could invite someone into at my own pace. Some mornings I left a drawing. Some mornings I left a line of pebbles arranged in a pattern that meant something only to me, and by the time the truck arrived, those pebbles had been rearranged into something else, a circle, a heart, an arrow pointing toward the sky. I learned the weight and shape of appreciation that did not insist on being noisy. It made me feel correct inside myself. Of course, the house knew. Houses are built with more ears than walls. The security team mentioned it to my father. They spoke in low voices, the kind men use when they are doing what they think is best. A recording from the gate camera, a still frame printed and slid across the desk. My father held the paper as if it were bleeding. When he came to me, his hand hovered in the air next to my face before it fell back to his side. "Amara," he said, saying my name the way a person says their first language, "if you need anything, you tell me." I do not know how many words a father thinks his daughter needs in exchange for a piece of her privacy. He called the head of the sanitation service. He called the security chief. He called the manager who filled out the schedules that built other men's days. He told them he didn't want anyone loitering outside the Salcedo home. He told them he wanted discretion. When my father wants something, the city usually finds a way to make it seem like it wanted it too. The next morning, the foil crane was missing. Why may be a small word, but it is a very big question. I left no drawing. I waited at the window with my heart pounding as if it would tire before the truck arrived. The truck came late. When it finally pulled up, two men I had never seen before jumped down. No hum, no whistle, no laugh that sounded like returning a thought. The new men moved quickly and threw the bins with the practiced indifference of people whose bodies have learned this choreography without consulting the soul. I watched the empty spot by the gate and felt something like grief's apprentice take its seat inside me. I tried not to imagine anything, that he had been punished, that he had been reassigned to punish me, that he had been told the rich girl was playing at friendship and that this wasn't his job. For 3 days the truck came without him. For 3 nights my sleep refused to be comfort. I tried to read. I tried to draw. The moon I drew looked like a bruise. On the 4th day, a figure stood by the gate at dawn. No truck, just a man with a cap in his hands, turning it. The security camera light blinked. I was already at the window. I was already halfway down the stairs by the time the guard had stepped out of his little house and put his hand up in question. The man said something. I could not hear through the glass. Something in his stance was apology, and something else was stubbornness. Only men with very important last names are allowed to be stubborn in this neighborhood. The guard, tired of carrying someone else's rules on his back, shrugged. The gate clicked and opened a fraction. The man placed a small box on the ground, stepped back, and looked up. Only not at my window now, but at the house. At me. At what he decided must be me, even if he couldn't see my face. He touched his forehead with 2 fingers in a gesture that was not quite a salute. and not quite a prayer. Then he left. When I reached the gate, the box waited where he had placed it. It was made from a cigar tin and two hinges that looked like they belonged in a toolbox my father would never open. I knelt and lifted the lid. Inside, nested and cushioned with tissue, was a tiny machine, a music box, the kind you wind. The crank was a nail with the tip blunted. I wound it once, twice. The metal teeth tugged at the air. The song that unfurled was not perfect. The notes at the edges were burrs, but the heart of the melody was unmistakable. Sa ugoy king duyan. My mother's hammock swinging in time across the years as if time was only lacquer. The air smelled like wet concrete and bougainvillea, and inside the gate a girl who had never given a word to the world felt something in her chest open like the lid of a jewelry box and stopped being afraid of what it kept. My father appeared at my shoulder, anger packaged as concern. He is not a cruel man. He is simply a man for whom control is a vitamin. "Who gave you that?" he asked. I held the box out, and he took it reflexively, and in one movement he could not take back. He closed the lid, and closed the song, and closed the morning. "People like that take advantage," he said. I do not know which part of his sentence hurt. The people like that? The take advantage? Or the way he said it, like he was reciting a Proverbs book for men who fear being mortal. He called the sanitation company again, and he said words to people whose voices already sounded tired. He made sure with the frightening efficiency of wealth that if the man with the patient face and humming voice returned to our street, he would lose his job. For a week the truck's route was the only thing that seemed to love routine more than my father did. I took the music box to my room and wound it when the house was empty, and my mother's lullaby braided itself into the space where my breath was loudest. I slept with the tin under my pillow and woke with a ringing in my ears that felt like loss, trying to be gentle. I wanted to see Matteo again, not because he made music, but because he had noticed mine. We had built a language together out of tin and foil and morning air. Did anyone explain this to my father when they called him sir 3 times in one sentence? Did anyone say, "Sir, some miracles are messy"? "Sir, some of us have to climb into a truck full of what others have thrown away in order to find the one thing that still sings"? The city is bolder than it knows. It argued back. A storm came with the sharp teeth of a dog protecting its cardboard kingdom. The rains that week shoved their fingers into everything. Trees bent in submission. Sheets of water marched down streets and turned corners like soldiers. The night of my father's biggest gala of the season, 30 tables, 1 politician at each of 10, a press line that extended like a tail and wagged in the air. Power lines shivered, then collapsed. The generator coughed to life and flooded the house with an ugly white light that made the gold look pale. The kitchen staff went to war with timing. The driver called to say he was stuck behind a fallen tree, and the florist called to say the garden roses had turned into a lush grave. The gate camera blinked, one-eyed. The security guard crossed himself and knocked on his own wood, as if that would keep it from swelling with the moisture and refusing to lock later. The storm, though, smoothed its skirts near dawn, and because trucks that carry other people's leftovers cannot afford to be cowards, the sanitation team set out. I woke early, my body tuned to their particular sound. The house was quieter than it should have been at that hour on gala day. I took the tin music box and went downstairs, barefoot, my heart tapping out a message I could not translate. The gate was open just enough to be awkward, like a mouth about to make the wrong apology. I reached it and looked out. The truck hadn't arrived, but there he was, climbing off the back of a different vehicle. A pickup donated by someone who didn't understand their donation would make this particular story possible. Matteo had a bundle wrapped in a plastic tarp. He walked toward the gap in the gate carefully, as if he carried a frightened animal. When the guard stepped forward, Matteo spoke, and the guard listened with his face. He looked toward the house, toward me, found my eyes even if he could not see them, and motioned to Matteo to wait. The guard, who had learned to hold other men's rules like a tray he couldn't set down, walked to the doorbell and pressed it. He gestured for me to come. He said nothing. His kindness was choosing not to tell me not to go. My father had already left to tour the venue. The staff were still sweeping the rain out of places rain loves. I stood in the foyer, the music box clenched in my hand as if it were a passport. And then I did the bravest thing I had done in my entire life. I walked out the front door and through the half-open gate. The air was the kind of fresh that hurts. Matteo stood just on the other side, hat in hand, his hair flattened by the storm. He didn't speak, he didn't smile. He crouched and laid the tarp bundle on the dry part of the driveway and peeled back the plastic like he was revealing a newborn. Underneath lay instruments made from trash. A guitar carved from an old oil can with a neck saved from a broken broom. A drum whose skin was a piece of rubber stretched tight across the top of a barrel. Flutes made from PVC pipe, their holes burned carefully with a heated nail. He pulled a violin out like a magician that finally took pity on his audience. Its body glued from cigar boxes, its bow strung with fishing line. He lifted a small makeshift xylophone whose keys were metal pipes cut by measured guesswork, a chorus of impossible possibility. He glanced over his shoulder. I followed his gaze and saw them, his team, standing behind the pickup, faces solemn with a kind of ceremony. 3 men and 1 woman from a different route, people who were supposed to be somewhere else right now, doing the invisible work that keeps a city livable. They were here instead, looking at me and then at Matteo, the way you look at a person who is about to do something that could cost them. He nodded, they nodded back. He chose the oil can guitar. He looped a strap of seatbelt fabric over his shoulder, adjusted the headstock, and touched the strings with 2 fingers, the way a person touches something sacred, to make sure it still exists. He looked at me. I held the music box to my chest. He began to play. There are notes that search, there are notes that knock, there are notes that break a lock like a sudden gasp. The progression he built was simple. A carpenter, proud of his dovetail, it asked permission to enter, then stepped in with muddy boots. The rhythm was patient and confident, like a person who knows the door is for him. Then the melody arrived, imperfect because it was sung on strings that used to hold engine oil and mop dust, unwavering because it was coming from a place that remembers what it is to need. The lullaby threaded out into the cool morning, into the wetness that still clung to the bougainvillea, into the cracks in the concrete where seedlings dreamt of being trees. Sa ugoy duyan. My mother's hammock moved, not in a bedroom this time, but in a driveway between a rich girl's fear and the rest of the world. The other sanitation workers lifted their own instruments. The xylophone chimed in. The PVC flute found the higher line like a bird that had decided to fly parallel to a river. The drum kept the proudest of time. I did not think. The lid inside my chest sprang open again and did not close. The first sound I made sounded like a breath that had been waiting in a jar. It startled the guard. It startled me. It did not startle Matteo. He did not look at me. He kept his eyes on the strings as if keeping his gaze there would keep the song's path steady. The sound I made turned into a syllable. The syllable had a name built into it. The name was my mother. Ma. I heard it as if someone else had lifted it from me, and I was the person receiving the gift. The plaza of my mouth widened, and the rest of the name rushed out like the tide does when it knows the sand is done grieving. Mama. The word settled in the air, astonishing and unsurprising at once. It was both a miracle and overdue. The xylophone player blinked so hard the wet on his cheeks could have been storm. The guard swore softly in a prayer that didn't ask for anything but offered thanks out of sheer panic. I was shaking. It is a strange thing to hear yourself break your own rule and realize that the rule was a bruise on your life, not a law. Mama, I said again, pressing the music box into my chest so hard the keys inside must have wondered if they were now another kind of heart. Matteo's mouth softened. He shifted into a second verse. The drum found a quieter beat. Something in the driveway eased, a taut wire slackening. Amara? The voice that came from behind me belonged to the only person on earth whose name was heavier than mine. My father. He had returned from the hall because the generator had failed and because the arc of other men's attention is never as reliable as his own will. He took one step toward the scene and saw what he was not prepared to see. His daughter outside the gate with men he had ordered away, an orchestra built from his city's discards, and a sound in the air he had been told to abandon hope for. He stopped. He looked at me like people look at clouds and realize they have been imagining shapes in them forever, and one day a shape looks back. His eyes found the music box in my arms and recognized it, not as evidence but as fact. Amara, he said, and his lips trembled on the second syllable. He said my name as a question and a revelation. He looked at Matteo with the elemental fury men reserve for the ones who teach them their strength hasn't saved them, then with something else that would take time to name. The song went on. Papa, I said. The word came out fragile and brave, a new-born deer told to cross a highway. It crossed anyway. It reached him, and he received it, like a man who had just caught a ring from a beloved who threw it across a river. His face disassembled. He put his hand to his mouth and then to his chest. He took another step, slow. Papa. The second time, it was easier. A ladder I built as I climbed it. Tears do not care about power dynamics. They signed a treaty with gravity a long time ago, and they obey it ruthlessly. My father looked helpless, and the part of me that had always been his was cruelly delighted by this evidence that he was, in fact, human, and not one of his buildings. The song finished. The last note did not want to leave. It lingered in the humid air like a commitment. The musicians lowered their instruments and stood very still. Matteo set the oil can guitar down and wiped his hands on his pants deliberately, as if cleaning them of something that could stain is how you prepare to be spoken to like a problem. He lifted his chin. My father, being exactly who he is, filled the space with the only thing he knows to fill space with: action. He ordered the gate open enough for him to pass through. He walked up to Matteo. The security guard forgot to be afraid. I held my breath. How did you know that song? My father asked. His voice was careful, each syllable placed like a glass on a tray. He wanted to say police and trespassing and fired and boundaries, but he said, how did you know that song? Matteo's eyes flicked to mine and back. I didn't, he said. Not for sure. She left drawings, a lemon, a moon, birds. I guess the lullaby might be the one everyone's mother sang. My mother sang it too, I hoped. His voice was both steady and trembling at the edges. If you have ever held a bridge inside your body and rolled a truck over it, you know what that sounds like. My father glanced at the instruments, at the makeshift orchestra, at the men and women who would pay for this with their hours, perhaps with their jobs. You could lose your work for this, he said. Matteo nodded. Yes, he said, but sometimes you have to do the unbelievable to remind someone that they're allowed to do the impossible. He didn't add that he had been reassigned because my father had made a call. He didn't add that he had come anyway. This is your fault, the part of my father that builds fortresses wanted to say. But another part, the one that keeps my mother's picture in the frame with mine and writes checks to hospitals without putting his name on the donor wall, put a hand on his own anger like you would calm a dog. Come inside, he said, surprising himself, surprising all of us. He didn't invite the whole orchestra. He invited Matteo. The others looked at me, and I looked back, and my glance tried to explain everything. Thank you, I see you. I promise the world will be different. They lifted their hands in quiet goodbyes and retreated to the pickup. The flute player tapped the brim of her cap. The drum sounded once by accident or design, like a distant thunder remembering itself, then fell silent.